Next panel is Julia Armstrong, Jan London, and Craig L. Stevens, President, Founder, Energy in Denial, Inc.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Julia Armstrong. Honorable members of the Assembly, thank you for holding this important hearing and for your leadership on this issue. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today. I hope that by being here today, I can help give a voice to millions of youth whose futures fracking puts at stake. On a personal note, I am a junior at Ontario Central School District, where I am a varsity runner. I took third at states in November. Given my great appreciation for clean air, I will speak to fracking's impacts to air quality. As per the DEC's instructions, my testimony refers primarily to sections 560.6C28 and 556.2b, which have to do with flaring, venting, and release of gases during the drilling and fracking process. These regulations allow for gas to be released from a well during many phases of fracking operations. Gases can be released when controlled testing is taking place, when a well is being prepared for production, when the shell is being fracked, and when a repair or improvement takes place. In cases of controlled testing, gas is allowed to escape for one 24-hour day. During production preparation and when a repair takes place, the wells can vent for 48 hours each. In total, gases can leak for 168 hours. It gets worse. Under a clause called Operational Requirements, drillers are essentially able to release gases whenever they think it is necessary or perhaps convenient. The DEC does not know for certain what gases can escape during such times, and monitoring is not required. And the DEC does not ask. However, scientists have a fair idea. The raw gas that gets released likely contains a variety of vaporous hydrocarbons, including butane, ethane, benzene, toluene, xylene, and others I probably could not pronounce. Of these, benzene is a known carcinogen, and evidence suggests the same is true for toluene and xylene, both of which have been found in blood and urine samples of residents living near fracking operations, in Texas specifically. Benzene exposure is linked to leukemia, lymphoma, and cancer of the bone marrow. How can it be that the DEC put out regulations that don't address these issues? To make matters worse, ground-level ozone is created when these volatile chemicals combine with tailpipe exhaust. Ground-level ozone, or smog, is linked to negative lung effects, including asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and heart failure. Unfortunately, few places have more tailpipe exhaust than fracking operations. In Chapter 6.11, Table 6.662 on page 6-303 of the SGEIS, the DEC estimates that each fracking well requires 6,790 industrial truck trips. Most of these trips come from diesel trucks. This summer, the World Health Organization declared that diesel fumes cause cancer, more so than secondhand cigarette smoke. The regulations do not address this major public health concern. As well as all of these dangerous chemicals, methane also leaks into our atmosphere. Methane is a particularly potent greenhouse gas that is disastrous to climate change. Studies from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration show significant levels of methane leakage associated with fracking operations. Yet inexplicably, the DEC does not address this issue, and the climate ramifications have not been considered in the state's review of fracking. In closing, fracking would create a terrible public health and environmental disaster. It threatens our water, our air, and the vitality of our environment. It greatly exacerbates climate change and stands in stark contradiction to the governor's promise to be a leader on climate change and environmental protection. For the sake of all New Yorkers and generations to come, New York must ban fracking. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Julia, and congratulations on your accomplishments. Jan?
Hi, my name's Jan London from Narrowsburg, New York, Sullivan County. I'd like to begin by playing about a minute excerpt from a lecture by Dr. Terry Engelder, who's the godfather of the Marcellus Shale. I attended and recorded this event on January 14, 2011 in LaPorte, PA. He was the first to predict the vast gas field trapped in the Marcellus Shale strata. He's an industry spokesman and supporter. Here he's discussing a, quote, gusher of hogwash, or in simpler terms, a load of bullcrap portrayed by Cabot Oil and Gas regarding Dimick's PA well failure. You should all have a CD copy of this excerpt that I copied for you last night.
Now, one of the things I'd like to spend a little bit of time with is explaining a Philadelphia Inquirer editorial that was entitled Gusher of Hogwash, right in here. This was an op-ed from April 28th, and the purpose of this was to identify, or at least point out, that both sides of the natural gas debate have said a lot of things that anyone would argue was a gusher of hogwash. Now, let me put an example of this up. This is a letter written by Cabot last fall. You recognize the chairman and president. Dingus signs it, and it says, "You continue to trumpet this fictional incident in an effort to stir up public opposition." Now, what he's talking about, of course, is the Ferentino well that went horribly wrong on the 1st of January 2009. I put a disclaimer up here. I point out, of course, we all agree, I think everyone in the room would agree that that particular statement underlined right here is a gusher of hogwash. No doubt about it. But I say, while this paragraph is hogwash, don't take it out of context. This is an obvious step in Cabot's defense during the legal process in the Dimick dispute with landowners. And don't think for a minute that Dingus even believes that this sentence is true, but it's just part of the process that brings a lot of hogwash into the legal system. All right, now...
All right. So basically he's saying that the industry is lying because it's a legal proceeding. I say that's part of the process. What he's saying is that's part of the process. That's not a process I want in my town or my state. Whenever there's a problem, deny, deny, deny. Industry's stand is that Dimick never happened and build their entire case of no groundwater risk around this lie. How many Dimicks would it take to ban this industry from New York State? Is that even part of the DEP's equation? Eventually, all leases will be owned by several overseas multinational corporations and investment groups. Pennsylvania existing leases have been brought and sold several times, like some investment get-rich-quick scheme. We're letting other countries control our subsurface rights under the guise of energy independence. In Colorado, there is a current study on the rapid decline of mule deer in a vast area with the most intense well pad production. Do you think it has anything to do with well pads, roads, pipelines, feeder lines, fragmentation of the surface? The gas industry is helping fund this study. Seems they're also in the study business. What do you think Mario thinks? Has anyone asked Mario Como what he thinks about fracking in his beloved New York State? I know I could always count on my dad for advice when life's hard decisions arose. Does anybody know where he stands? Me, I'm not waiting for the governor's decision. I signed a lease 3 months ago. It's a 20-year lease through Sungevity to put photovoltaic solar panels on my house. It will cost me less than $50 a month to have most of my electricity come from the sun. With an additional hot water solar exchange system planned in the future, I'll save even more as energy rates rise. Just in December, there was a major breakthrough in making lighter, thinner, cheaper, and more efficient solar panels. Now, that's a lease I won't regret in 20 years. Please protect our land, our water, and forest from industrialization that will be obsolete in 20 years. Thank you so much for having this hearing. Thanks for staying so late.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you for being here. Steve?
Good evening, Chairman Sweeney. Craig Stevens, sixth-generation landowner in Silver Lake Township, Pennsylvania, proud son of Lloyd Stevens, home Montrose, Pennsylvania, also proud son of Margaret Peggy Coyer from Oswego, New York. I'm a fifth-generation New Yorker. I went down your list here, and also I wanted to thank Mr. Kavanaugh, Mr. Levine, Ms. Lifton. There were 13 to start. Now there's 4. I'm going to call you the Fantastic Four. Thank you for staying. Thank you for listening. I hope you'll give me a little leeway since we saw some other people speak fairly long earlier that were pro. I live in northeastern Pennsylvania. I am an affected resident. We call ourselves the extraction colony. I'll explain that in a minute. I live my life very simply. That's the Constitution of the state of Pennsylvania. Very quickly, I'm going to read what Section 27, Article 1 says. The people have a right to clean air, pure water, and to the preservation of the natural, scenic, historic, and aesthetic values of the environment. Pennsylvania's public natural resources are the common property of all the people, including generations yet to come. As trustee of these resources, the Commonwealth shall conserve and maintain them for the benefit of all the people. Did you hear that part that says generations yet to come? I have 4 beautiful children that will be the 7th generation owners of my property. What's happening now in the state of Pennsylvania makes me sick, and it should you too. If you've never visited, we would be happy to have the entire panel that was here come down and see what we're living with. This is the water from Demick, Pennsylvania, Ray Kimball's well from June of this year. That is Ray's pre-drill tests that were done by Cabot, showing absolutely nothing wrong with the water and no methane in it before drilling occurred. In September 11th of 2008, 33 people's water went bad when they drilled 3 vertical wells, not horizontal drilling, vertical. Of those 33, 19 filed a lawsuit. Of those 19, within a year, 7 were settled with Cabot. They paid him a lot of money to be quiet. The 12 stuck together for almost 2.5 years. Immediately, Cabot brought water to these people. 11 people were delivered water, paid for by Cabot Oil and Gas. I'll tell you how much it costs, $100 a day per household to be topped off. That's $1,100 a day times 30 days. Do any of you have $3,000 a month to keep water coming to your house if it goes bad when an industrial occurrence happens in your area? I sure don't. So for 2.5 years, Cabot was forced to bring water, but they did bring those buffaloes right away when the water went bad. Because in the beginning, they were acting like they were interested in helping, and so did the DEP. DEP, Department of Environmental Protection. We don't call it that anymore. We call it Don't Expect Protection. I have a letter in my briefcase from the Department of Environmental Protection said, I can only call one person, Colleen Connolly, the spokesperson. You know who the spokesperson used to be? A lady that now represents Williams Oil and Gas. She went from the spokesperson for DEP to represent Williams Corporation. I find that very interesting. This list, which I'll read very quickly to the scary ones, This water was tested to have 3 types of uranium, including 1 weapons grade, 3 types of thorium, lithium, barium, strontium. I don't know about you, but I don't like things with EM on the end that are in my water. It's scientific evidence. I'm not a PhD. I'm a simple person that looks at reality. What I do know is we invited the governor. We have a new governor for the last 2 years, Governor Corbett. He put in a man named Michael Krancer as the head of the DEP. Michael Krancer's former job was the chief legal counsel for the second largest energy company in the United States. He protected them from environmental lawsuits. He was the Environmental Hearing Board judge on the federal court overseeing this case before he became the DEP secretary. I'll ask you, and it's a rhetorical question, how many times do you think Michael Krancer came to DEMEC, which was the #1 story in the world on environmental disasters relating to drilling? How many times does the Secretary of the DEP and Governor Corbett, since they've been in office for 2 years, come to visit anybody in the DEMEC area that had contaminated water? That would be 0. Never. The previous DEP secretary that was listed earlier was John Hanger. John Hanger was in DEMEC, a 2-hour drive from his home, 3 to 4 days a week, and on the phone every day with at least 1 or more of the people that had contaminated water. We've been thrown under the bus. And if anybody here on this panel, or Governor Cuomo, thinks the DEC is going to do any better of a job, we have all kinds of laws on the books to protect us. Many, many laws. They don't do any good unless they're enforced. And the lack of enforcement is ridiculous where we are. I have a document right here. See, earlier today you had some people talk about that there's nothing wrong in DEMEC, never was wrong. EPA came and said there's nothing wrong. I have the EPA documents here, but on the front is a consent order signed by Dan O. Denges, CEO, Cabot Oil and Gas, undersigned by Kevin Cunningham, their chief legal counsel for their entire corporation, stating, I'm going to read you the paragraph. This is on page 5, C. Cabot agrees that this consent order and settlement agreement is valid, is a binding obligation upon Cabot, and is a final order of the department, and neither Cabot nor any authorized representative, agent, or attorney of Cabot, or representing Cabot in any court, administrative forum shall state or argue otherwise for any purpose. He signed that twice. Okay? So our problem is, we got plenty of, I don't know how good they are at drilling holes in the ground, any of the industry, but Cabot especially, and getting gas out, but they are awesome at destroying people's water. And I'd love to just pick on them about DEMEC, but we were just told a few months ago by the DEP that 8 miles south in Lenox, Lenox, Pennsylvania, there are 4 people currently getting water delivered, paid for by Cabot Oil and Gas. In Franklin Forks, 2 miles from my house, there are 3 people getting water delivered, paid for by WPX, which was Williams Energy until January 1st, 2012. They seem to change the name to protect the guilty. I'm sorry, innocent, I would imagine. What we're worried about in Pennsylvania now is surviving this. You heard about the list of the harmed. Very easy to Google. That is the list of the harmed. 750 listings. This is not, we are making it up. This lady, this hero of ours, Jenny Lysick from Western PA, she combs all over the United States for newspaper articles. Everyone's name has links to articles that were in their local papers. This is not made up by us. Have you seen this yet? List of pipeline accidents in the United States from 1890 to the year 2000. There are literally hundreds from every state in the United States. Explosions. One of them in 1910 blew up a school, killed over 200 people, teachers and students. You'll never hear about that from the industry. This is more exciting to me. This is from 2000 to 2013. List of pipeline accidents in the United States in the 21st century. Over 302 listings from 40 states, including many from New York. Why do we never hear about these on their wonderful commercials? By the way, you know who their PR company is? Hill and Knowlton. Hill and Knowlton 70 years ago talked my mother and my father into smoking is cool and good for you. I've lost 12 immediate family members from smoking-related cancer. I don't really appreciate Hill and Knowlton representing the industry because they said the same thing about smoking 50, 60, and 70 years ago. It was great. I'm hearing the same words coming out of the TV set about this industry, and it's all lies. Now, you heard about a court case. Norse Energy just didn't leave the state because you guys won't let them drill. They declared bankruptcy to the tune of $36 million. I've got a list here, and you can look it up. It's public record. You know how many New York companies they left holding the bag for millions of dollars? That's what they do. When it doesn't work out for them, they declare bankruptcy, crash the corporation, and come back. Oh, by the way, Norse Energy is the country of Norway. There's no difference. That's a nationalized company. How did I get introduced into this game? I lived in California. I was born and raised in California. I moved to my ancestral home in 2010. I bought it for my family to restore it. I went down to the county clerk and pulled up the records to make sure my and my brother and sister's name were listed on the deed and had been changed. And I found a gas lease from Chesapeake that had been signed. Their landman found my 95-and-a-half-year-old grandmother in a nursing home and signed her to a $135.10 an acre lease. And guess what, folks? She didn't own the property. She was the life tenant only. She had gifted it to her 3 children. My father was one of them in 1994, 13 years earlier. My father had been deceased for only 10 weeks. They found out what they did wrong, contacted my aunt and uncle who live on the West Coast. They signed an agreement with that. Not once did they attempt to contact my brother, my sister, myself, deeded landowners in the state of Pennsylvania. And we found out later they knew it. Why is that important? Because my father told us on his deathbed, he died horribly of cancer. He told us on his deathbed, with many dealings with the industry, if their mouth is moving, they are lying to you. I didn't know what he meant in 2007, but I know what he means now. I found out about that discrepancy, that there was a gas lease on my property. I attempted to communicate with Chesapeake Energy, and they hung up the phone on me. I don't like to be hung up on, do you? So I called their partners. Guess who they sold 1/3 interest of 32,000 leases in the Northeast to in November of 2008? 1.8 million acres. Stat Hydro Oil paid over $6,000 per acre for 1/3 interest in 32,000 leases. Stat Hydro Oil is also the country of Norway. I was at that time watching all these great commercials on TV about America's fuel. If it's America's fuel, why are China, India, Russia, Japan, and Norway so interested in helping us get it out of the ground? I wonder if it's going to stay here. Vic Furman earlier said, drill a well and bring a soldier home. To what? My water has been impacted, not anywhere near as great as that. But I'll tell you what's interesting. There's Act 13. The Act 13 that was talked about earlier, you know what this is? 7 communities, 1 doctor, and Maya Van Rossum from Delaware River Keepers. When Act 13 went through, they sued it. They didn't think this was constitutional. Well, guess what? On June 6th, the Supreme Court of the state of Pennsylvania heard this case, and on July 26th, a month and a half later, they found that 4 of the items in here were unconstitutional and they were voided. And it took only 7 communities to do that. Is the industry fighting it? Of course they are. They don't want to lose their good thing there. This is my ancestral home that I'm fighting so hard to save. I'm surrounded by gas wells, surrounded by contaminated water. They talked about businesses. The businesses are gone. They're leaving. We have 7 major businesses that have left, including Montrose Publishing that's been in Montrose for over 200 years. Why did they move out if everyone's making so much money? This couple came from Philadelphia and bought 4 properties, rented only to the gas industry. For 3 years I lived there. They never had to advertise. It was full to the hilt every day, paid for 6 months in advance. This is just fairly recently. All 4 properties are listed for rent. You don't put ads in the paper if you're full. Now, Cabot, oil and gas. They come and ruin 33 people's water, don't take responsibility for it, talk their way out of it. You know how they got out of it? John Hanger cut a deal for $4.1 million. When this happened, the state law in Pennsylvania was all the wells were within 1,000 feet of where they drilled. State law, if you drill a hole within 1,000 feet of a water well for any purpose, you are automatically liable to fix it. The gas lease by the person that owns this and all those people in Demick, their leases were boilerplate Cabot leases. I've seen them. There is a paragraph that says if your water is deemed to be contaminated by a state agency, I just read you that the state agency did find it, we will repair or replace your water to original better condition immediately. This happened on September 11, 2008. That was 4.5 years ago, folks. But it's all fixed. Well, the EPA came in, our saviors. And you know what they did? They did a 64 well test, plume test. And we were very excited about it. Vic Furman said earlier they were excited and begged for them to come in. They were screaming that they had no authority to come into the state of Pennsylvania to look at anything. Stay the hell out, EPA. That's exactly what New York Landowners Coalition said and all the pro-drilling people in our area. But the EPA came in. And we thought, great, we've got the federal government here to help since the state is ignoring us. That information I showed you, that testing data, they dropped that off. They went in and met with families and sat with their children and grandchildren and laid paperwork on their kitchen table and said, the chief toxicologist for the Environmental Protection Agency of the United States of America says your water is safe to drink, safe to bathe in, safe to shower in, safe to utilize. And you know what the people that owned the water did? On camera, they went and got big, frothing, foaming glasses of that, set it right in front of them and said, you first. And you know how many times they got taken up on that offer? 0. You know why? Because that water is poison, and everybody knows it. Nobody from the New York Landowners Coalition group, nobody from anywhere will come and drink the water there. You know why? Because they don't want to die or get sick. That's why. Now, what happened? 2.5 years of water deliveries that costed Cabot Oil and Gas $1.5 million. They got fined $4.1 million that went into escrow accounts. You know what they did? They were so nice, John Hanger. He told the residents there he was going to give them twice the value of their homes for compensation that the state got. That's the largest settlement ever in the history of the state of Pennsylvania, $4.1 million for 19 people. Now I have a home, and if I tried to sell it, I could probably get about $125,000 for it. But at the tax office, because it hasn't changed hands for 180 years, it says $27,000. They doubled the tax value of their homes to give them, not the fair market resale value. The worst case of that endemic was Victoria and Jimmy Schweitzer, very wonderful people. They took a 7-acre lot that they paid $80,000 for, and they built an $800,000 custom-built house on it. 3 different appraisers, $800,000. But they said if it only had good water, you can't give it away now. And instead of doubling that number and giving them $1.6 million for their trouble, they got a $160,000 offer from the state. What are we doing here, folks? Why am I here? I'm here to tell you that no matter how many regulations and rules you put in place, unless they follow them, unless you enforce them, there's nothing to it. But let me tell you how excited we were to see that the Susquehanna County Chamber of Commerce gave Cabot Oil and Gas this year Business of the Year. Because they donated a few $1 million and helped raise it to get our hospital in. You know why they helped put a new hospital where we are? Because we're going to need it. For all of our family members and friends that are going to get sick and die from poisoning from this water. We asked, who gave them that? And the Business Commission said, we didn't do it. We just take the nominees from the county commissioners. Well, guess what? We asked the county commissioners on camera, too, at a meeting. They declined to say they picked them. Nobody takes responsibility. The fact that these people are not only still drilling in the state of Pennsylvania, they're the #1 producer. They're responsible for that, and not only Demick, but in Lennox and who God knows elsewhere. Now, you have the Constitution Pipeline coming to you if you so desire. I've been fighting it because it starts in Pennsylvania for 20 miles, and then it cuts right through to here, Albany. And you know what? It's a FERC line. You know what that means? Most of the area here in the southern tier is called Class 1 rural. Do any of the four of you know what Class 1 rural means? There is no oversight. The federal government does not oversee it. PIMSA, not FERC, no DEC, no DEP, no county, no oversight whatsoever. When you build a compressor station or a pipeline in a Class 1 rural area, it's self-reporting. If they have a problem, they're in charge of it. Am I lying to you? No. I'll show you. It's very simple to show you. This is the 2012 Hazard Mitigation Plan. Every county in your state and in every other state in the United States has to put one of these together every 5 years or they lose all their funding. That's a legal document registered with Pennsylvania Emergency Management and with FEMA. I'm going to show you the Lathrop compressor. Did you hear Mr. Kurkowski talk about the compressor station in Windsor earlier? That blew up this year. They released gas into the air during a lightning storm, and a giant fireball. That's on one end of the laser pipeline. By the way, I have a half a mile of it across my property. My family was stupid enough to go into business with these people. We know better now. But this paragraph after these pictures, that is the Lathrop station with the roof blown off, the walls blown out, and the interior burned. And when it blew up, nobody in Susquehanna County from emergency management had the foam to put out the fire. It's a specialized foam. They had to drive up from Lackawanna County. It took an hour and a half to get there. DEP gave us a hearing about it. And when we asked them the question, when did you show up? 4 hours after the explosion. It was surrounded by 15 different emergency responders standing back. They joked we should have brought the hot dogs, buns, and condiments because all we did was stand around and watch that fire burn. Anybody see what happened in West Virginia just last month and a half ago? A 20-inch high-pressure pipeline blew up, opened up, and shot a 200-yard flamethrower across 5 houses and across a major highway, north and south. It melted the asphalt for 800 feet. Melted it, burned it right off. But there's no problem with putting a pipeline anywhere, right? Well, how about Elk Lake? Cabot's partner, Williams, that wants to build the Constitution Pipeline. By the way, they're going to use eminent domain if you let them do this. Eminent domain means that's a 30-inch high-pressure gas line. They can bore right underneath the foundation of your house because there is no setbacks with a FERC line. And they don't have to ask your permission. They just have to tell you where it's going to go. Now, here's the funny part. That goes 120 miles to Albany from Brooklyn, Pennsylvania. This little line here is my 33-mile one. That has 10 compressor stations. 5 are currently on it, and 5 more proposed to go 33 miles, and it's 16-inch. You want to hear the joke, the funny part? They filed with FERC. There is one compressor station right there in Schoharie County. One. On a 120-mile, 30-inch high-pressure gas line. Who are they kidding? Now, all the termination happens right here in Brooklyn, PA. They happen to be building one called the Central H Pre-Compressor Station. But they say it doesn't have anything to do with the Constitution line. It's not part of it. That's a false filing by FERC. We're getting tired of the state government, our local government, and every other government not helping us. So I'm wearing my father's flight jacket. He spent 63 years of honorable service in the Civil Air Patrol, starting off at Squadron 129 in New York State when he was 11 years old. And then he died here in Pennsylvania, still a lieutenant colonel. He specialized in emergency management. If you remember who Tom Ridge was, he was the governor of Pennsylvania and resigned and took on Homeland Security. His second call was to my father. My father was an emergency services expert. Why am I mentioning that? Because when WPX drilled 4,000 feet away from Franklin Forks on both sides, the Depew well on 4,000 feet away on the west, 4,000 feet on the east was the Hollenbeck well, and on December 6th, over a year ago, the water went black for 6 families on Route 29 in Pennsylvania. And guess what? They called the DEP, and they called WPX, and they showed right up, and they're investigating. To this day, 13 months later, they have no answer. But for 4 months, these people had contaminated water. There was so much pressure of methane in their water well, it was erupting every few hours and shooting water out 20 feet to each side of the well. Well, after 4 months, I found out about it. I'm just a neighbor. I didn't know the people from Adam. A friend of mine, I went and visited. We knocked on their door. Very nice family, Matt and Tammy Manning, in their 40s. Their 2 daughters live with them and 3 grandchildren. 3 generations, 7 people in one house. At one point, they had 86 milligrams per liter of methane coming up through their water. They had to leave their windows open in December, January, February, and March to avoid asphyxiation when they took a shower. The DEP did nothing. Neither did WPX. So the next day I had 5 news crews in their front yard. And nobody liked that. Boy, WPX was very upset about that. And DEP too, very embarrassing. So I gave them one chance. Are you going to disconnect their water wells, put water buffaloes attached to their house for clean water, and put a vent pipe on their wells? No, they're not. They're still investigating. So the next day I did what my father would have done if he was here. I called PEMA, Pennsylvania Emergency Management. You have an emergency management in Pennsylvania too, or New York too. They all went to work when Hurricane Sandy happened. I called PEMA and I just declared an emergency methane explosion hazard on Route 29 in Franklin Forks, Pennsylvania. And in 5 seconds I was talking to Bob Full, the director of the state of Pennsylvania's emergency management. He couldn't believe what I was telling him. So guess what Bob did after I talked to a beeping line that recorded me? Because you don't call emergency management and declare a disaster or an emergency without it being real. He got off the phone with me very upset. He called Secretary Krancer, and that conversation lasted 2 minutes. He said, you get involved in this, or I do. I bring the full weight of the emergency management system. The next day, guess what happened? Well, good neighbor WPX showed up and was installing 1,100-gallon water buffaloes, detaching their water well, and putting vent pipes. What is going on here? Cabot at least had the decency of putting water buffaloes in everybody's houses right away because they didn't want to drink that water either. So that was 4 years ago. A year ago when it happens, the families have to wait over 4 months, still no answer what happened, and we had to threaten them to get water buffaloes installed. Now, I'd like to tell you that's the only problem in the state of Pennsylvania. That's just the tip of the iceberg. So now we give tours, reality tours. I can back up everything I'm saying. But you know what I can't do? That's the Bible, and there's the U.S. Constitution. In these documents, including the Constitution of the state of Pennsylvania, I can find no legal authority for anybody in power or elected official for putting the citizens of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania through that. I read you what protections we have on our environment. They're not only being ignored, we might as well burn that, use that document to start a fire with, because we're not going to get any help. So I implore you, I took a little bit longer, but I'm the only person you had up here that's lived through this. What happened in Demick? I'm going to really quickly tie that up. After the EPA stabbed them in the back and wouldn't drink the water and announced that the water was fine, guess what happened? The local residents, the drill baby drill people, oh, they're nice people. They have Demick, where the water is clean and the people are friendly. You know what I found out? When these people, when the state offered a water line to fix, the state put $12 million in a fund to have a water line built out to Demick to fix the problem. Their neighbors started enough already and put signs up in the yard that said no water pipeline. How'd you like to drive by that to go to your house where you're living on a delivered water every day? Right? Then they started Demick Proud. So what did the Demick Proud people do after the EPA stabbed the neighbors in Demick in the back? Well, they petitioned their own state representatives, just like you people, state representatives. They said, hey, why are they holding us up? We want drilling to go on. So Tina Pickett, their state rep, and Gene Yaw, their state senator, wrote letters to Secretary of the DEP, to Secretary Krancer, and asked the same question. And there's a 9 square mile moratorium radius that's still in effect around that area. Nothing happened. There's nothing wrong with the water. Then why did the state put a 9 square mile no drilling radius around those people? And why did they decide to allow Cabot to come in and frack only? Every bit of the drilling had already been done 3.5 years earlier, the vertical and the horizontal. So they fracked only 2 new wells out of 7. They get permission to do 7. And guess what happened over Thanksgiving? The person who owns this water, it went 1,000 times worse than this. This Thanksgiving. That's our state. Not only don't they punish the company that did it, Not only did they buy everybody off with a $4 million promise, no water line, which would have fixed their problem and returned their home value, some of these people are living, hook their water back up to their house and put a filter on it. Hey, Culligan can't take this out. Nobody can take this out. You can't take uranium, strontium, barium, and thorium out with a Culligan or any other water filter on this planet. It'll eat right through it. So they let them refrack, and guess what? We're going to prove now that fracking only can cause water contamination, because Cabot Oil and Gas thought they were smart enough, but they were dumb enough to frack only. Those two fracks were right next to wells that have been cemented shut by order of the state of Pennsylvania because of the contamination. Thank you, Cabot Oil and Gas. I can't wait for you to be the ones that prove that fracking does cause water contamination. I'm going to wrap up here with a couple quick things. Number one is, I don't know if anybody made it to Farm Aid this year, but it was the first year Farm Aid was ever in, or second time in Pennsylvania, but it was the first time I've ever been able to go to it. Well, Farm Aid's interesting because they're all about farmers, right? What's the one word they didn't say from stage in the 12-hour show? The word fracking. You know why? You don't upset your sponsors, right? Well, PASA, Pennsylvania Association of Sustainable Agriculture, representing 6,000 farmers in the state of Pennsylvania, was the sponsor of Farm Aid this year in Hershey, Pennsylvania, at Hershey Park. And we got to go on Friday before the show, the day before, and they had a 3-hour symposium on fracking and the family farm. That's interesting. So they had a symposium. That's great. So then we went to the show the next day. PASA has a statement, which I'll find here in a second, but their statement is that they're demanding from the state of Pennsylvania, here it is, and I'll read it to you. It's a very short, sweet statement from them. 6,000 farmers represented by PASA. PASA asserts its position in favor of a moratorium on unconventional gas extraction until it is determined that this practice will not impair the ability of farms to profitably produce healthy food while respecting Pennsylvania's air quality, water resources, and natural environment. Now, I've determined, because I have 4 children, and I'm hoping to have grandchildren sometime. I'm only 52, so they don't have to rush. But I'll tell you what. You let this industry come across that line. I'm standing in the way, and I know there's a lot of people that were in this room with me. Thousands of us will link arms. This industry does not come to my mother's home state, because we're going to have to cut it out of my home state of Pennsylvania like a cancer. This is generational suicide. What are we burying underneath the ground to start popping up in 5, 10, or 20 years? Some of it's going to percolate down there, and then when it pops up, we're not even going to know what's happening. I have hundreds of neighbors. You know what we can't find out? You know what the water buffalo in the United States is not an endangered species. They're everywhere. I wish that was funny, but you know what? You drive around and they're sitting right in people's front yard. And you know why nobody's heard about it? Because if you make the mistake of calling the drilling company first and they come and bring one, first the thing they make you do is sign a non-disclosure that you won't tell anybody about it because we're working it out. But then they don't have to report to the DEP. The DEP. Guess how many gas well permits they issued in the year 2011? 10,000. 10,000. Divided by 250 work days, if you're good at math, and I am, that's 40 drilling permits a day. They must have a couple guys sitting in a room going like this all day long. So I called them, and I asked them, is there anywhere on the DEP site that I could look up and see which engineer or environmental engineer signed off on each location here? He said, I know what you're getting at. You've got an agenda. Oh yeah, I've got an agenda. It's to protect the property that 5 generations buried 2 miles down the street from me, past me, with clean air, clean water, and fertile land. And guess what? To this date it still is. But there's only 6 of us standing up now in the entire northeastern Pennsylvania fighting this because everyone else has been quieted with money. Boy, they're good at giving money away to everybody except for the people they damage. They donate to the hospital, buy a new van bookmobile for the library. They donate to every charity in the area. The churches love them. The churches will not speak poorly of them. It's amazing what you can buy with money. But I don't know about you folks, but I was raised by people that told me, you know who your friends and family are. You know who you grew up with and went to school with. You know who your neighbors are. They're the people you'll help when they need it. They're not the people that come in handing out $1,000 bills. They are not our friend. So I'm going to end. I've spoken 70 communities in New York State this past year. 70. I was invited to come and speak. Landowner to landowner. And even the New York Landowners Coalition people and the Friends of Natural Gas New York will talk to me because I'm a landowner with a lease and a pipeline. And I end my speaking engagements with an exercise program. And I'm going to share it with you because you get used to doing it if you let them come here. The first thing you have to learn how to do is go like this. Just work those muscles up. Because as long as you're shaking your head yes, you're their friend. Do not worry about doing this. I have a question. Because they don't like questions very much. They get a little upset. And if you have to literally brace your neck, put it in a neck brace, don't ever accidentally even shake your head left or right. Because you will be destroyed, not only by them, but your own community. Fracking the ground is one thing, but fracturing the community, you can't survive it. That's what's going to happen here. I implore you, you're working on rules. There is no rules that will protect you. When you greenlight this, if you ever do, it will be like the Normandy invasion. I live in a rural property 8 miles from Montrose, Pennsylvania. And over 400 heavy trucks a day drive by my house. And when they blew out the creek, when they were installing the pipeline behind my house, Laurel Lake Creek, 8 times in a row over 2 months, so bad they had to dam it on each end to just blow it right out and let the mud flow. When they did that the first day on July 29th of 2011, and the mud trucks come and suck up the mud and drive down the road, and one of them ran a stop sign. It had 3 faulty brakes and a driver that didn't have a commercial driver's license. He flipped it over on my neighbor John Jones's Subaru, crushing him into the driver's side of the vehicle. It didn't kill him instantly. He was alive for 5 minutes. His daughter Allison was in the passenger seat, opened the door, she was untouched, and watched her father die, telling her, "I'm sorry, I was just trying to be safe and not get in front of that truck." Don't tell me fracking doesn't kill people. Ask John Jones' lovely wife and his 2 beautiful daughters. And guess what? When that driver got out of the hospital, he hightailed it back to Texas. It's a crime in any state to drive a commercial vehicle without a driver's license. And he killed somebody. That's manslaughter. They're never going to find him. The workers, local jobs. Forget it. You know what the guy that delivered the water to Demick told me when we tried to get him to deliver? Because when the state cut off their water deliveries on November 30th of 2011, some of us decided we weren't going to let that happen. So I spent $6,000 of my own money, and I bought a flatbed truck, and we bought a 550-gallon water buffalo, and I hired a driver. By the way, the driver also has contaminated water in Demick. And we have been delivering water to those families for over a year now. There's only 3 left now, but there was 9 originally, because that's what you do. But we asked that driver, will you keep delivering the water? He said, I'd love to, at $100 a day. We said, well, we can't afford that. Can't afford $3,000 a month for a household. He said, well, I can't do it anyway, because if Cabot catches me doing it, even if I do it off hours, they will fire me, blackball me, and guess what he told me next? You tell this to your business owners. Every business I talk to gets paid net 90 or 120. Anybody here own a business? I'm a business owner. Net 90 or 120. That means every business in Susquehanna County and the area are called indentured servants. He told me he's $100,000 in the hole every time he gets money from them for what they owe him for the last 3 or 4 months. This is the guy that's delivering water for them. He said, you do nothing to upset them. They will literally dump you, and then good luck getting your money in court. Be careful what you're doing, and I'm going to end my talk with my favorite quotes here. Einstein, definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. How about this one? Sir Edmund Burke, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. Martin Luther King, I'll end it with. We fear not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And in Pennsylvania, that silence is deafening. I pray to God you make the right decision and keep these people out of your beautiful state, because I'm going to need to come and buy my ancestral home here to live when my water is destroyed. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you all very much.